is a weakened negotiator by all of this. She's also, incidentally, weakened in her negotiations with those potential coalition or potential partners in Parliament anyway. We're not at the stage of talking about a formal coalition yet, the DUP, because they can see that she's weakened, and they will use that. They're about to go into negotiations with Sinn Féin about returning to Stormont. They can use that against her too.
OK, Carl, for the moment, I know you'll keep an eye on that door for us if we are due to hear from the Prime Minister, as we've been led to believe this morning. I know he will come to you straight away. Thank you for the moment. Well, this morning, this is the state of the parties. If you're just joining us, the Conservatives have 317 seats so far, the biggest number, but short of that 326 needed for an outright majority. Labour has 261, the Lib Dems have 12, UKIP have lost their only seat, and the SNP have lost a third of theirs and now have 35. In Northern Ireland, the DUP have 10 seats and Sinn Féin have 7. Now, those results, of course, could be key as those parties look for ways of making a government work. Other parties across the UK hold 6 more. So where does that leave us, and what is the next government going to look like? We can cross now to our correspondents who've been following the party leaders throughout the campaign, and first to Emily Morgan, who is with the Conservatives at their party HQ. And what are you hearing from there this morning, Emily? The sense is that that very tight circle around the Prime Minister is drawing ever tighter at the moment. What word from the rest of the party, and indeed what levels of anger?
Well, it's been a shocking night, obviously, for the Conservatives, and a shocking night for Theresa May, and one that will reverberate for days to come. At the moment, we don't have a government. Theresa May has spectacularly failed to increase her majority. Indeed, she's lost seats. She's surrendered the Conservatives' majority. So there is anger and there is upset across the party. She did come to Conservative headquarters here behind me in the early hours this morning at about 3:30 to speak to party workers, to thank them for all the work that they have done. And I understand from someone who was inside that it was a fairly sad occasion. I was told that there weren't tears, but it wasn't the massive jubilant party that they were expecting to have. I also understand that there was no indication from her speech that she had any inclination to stand aside. Indeed, as Carl was saying, she is not planning to stand aside. She is holed up in Downing Street at the moment, as you say, with a very close-knit set of advisers trying to form some sort of government. What that government will look like and how it will be formed, we simply don't know. But Carl was obviously talking about the DUP. She is in talks with them, and they could offer her the chance to form a minority government. But crucially, and this is crucial, do the party want her to lead the Conservative Party? Now, some MPs are calling for her to consider her position. Obviously, Jeremy Corbyn has called for her to resign. But at the moment, we are in a very, very chaotic, tricky situation. There are a lot of unknowns, and at the moment it looks like Theresa May is her authority has severely been damaged, and how long she can limp on we simply don't know.
Spot there this morning, sounds. Emily, thank you for that. We can cross now to Rachel Younger at Labour Party HQ. Mr Corbyn has been there this morning. Big smile on his face, of course, Rachel, and we've heard that they're seeking to form a minority government. What's his next move?
Yeah, that's right, and things are in a state of flux here too, although as you can imagine a very different atmosphere to the one that Emily has just described. I've just been told by a source close to him that his next move right now is to try and get himself some food. Then he will be meeting with senior figures from the party. We've just seen John McDonnell actually join him inside the building. He spent time here thanking his campaign staff, and I think he feels a tremendous debt of gratitude to those who worked so hard for him. It's difficult to overstate, really, the emotional roller coaster they have been on, this team who have been so close to him, and Jeremy Corbyn himself. There was only one word to describe how they were feeling last night, right before that exit poll, and that was deeply nervous. They wanted to believe in what they'd seen, what we saw as we followed them at places right across the country, these huge crowds turning out for them, and people saying that they hadn't voted Labour before, but they were being attracted by this passion, this energy they were seeing from Jeremy Corbyn, and a manifesto they really felt was cutting through. And that will be right at the heart of their argument this morning as they seek to push their opportunity to try and form a minority government. They know they have to give Theresa May a first shot at it, but Jeremy Corbyn was very clear when he spoke this morning. He said he feels that it was their strong and hopeful policies that have gained such an amazing response from the public. And he asked who's won this election. He said, I think that's pretty clear. They feel that they have got the moral victory here. It's difficult, isn't it? Because she has won and yet feels like she's lost. He has lost, but the feeling here is one that they've won. It now gets very, very complicated, and they need to try to work out how best to capitalise on that.
OK, Rachel, back to you later in the morning, no doubt. Thank you for that. And also, Emma Murphy's been travelling with the Lib Dems down to London from Tim Farron's constituency and sent us this a little earlier.
So Tim Farron is heading to London after a reasonable night for the Liberal Democrats. They did gain 3 more seats, taking them up to 12 seats in Parliament. Among them, we saw some of the big beasts that have graced the party before come back into the fold in Twickenham. Vince Cable, Ed Davey in Kingston, and also Jo Swinson up in Dunbartonshire East. She's somebody that they've really got their eye on for the future. But in terms of losses, the most significant was Nick Clegg. He was ousted from his seat in Sheffield Hallam. It seems that the nightmare that never stops giving for the Liberal Democrats is that U-turn on tuition fees from all those years ago. They also lost Richmond, which they only won in 2016 when they overturned Zach Goldsmith's 23,000 majority. Now, Tim Farron, throughout the campaign, throughout the time we've spent with him, has been really clear that there is going to be no pacts, no coalitions and no deals done with other parties to help them get into power. He says he stands by that this morning when we spoke to him just a couple of hours ago, but he is going to be in central London. He is no doubt going to be in meetings and taking calls, and there will be a lot of pressure on him. The Liberal Democrats will be the people that both parties want to talk to see if there's a way forward in this stalemate.
That's Emma Murphy en route to London with Tim Farron. Well, let's break down those results with our election analyst Colin Rallings and our correspondent Chris Shipp joining us to take us through it. And you've taken us through the whole night, Colin, so big medal for you. Just give us the headline take on this. I mean, the share of the vote, the two-party system is back with a vengeance. Break it down for us.
Well, there was a plan behind this election, Julie, wasn't it? And the Conservatives were going to call it, and everyone who'd voted UKIP in 2015 was going to flood to the Conservatives. You add those two shares of the vote together, Mrs May would win by a landslide. Well, part one of the plan worked. UKIP has been completely diminished down to 2%. But the crucial other part of the plan simply hasn't worked. UKIP voters did not simply flood to the Conservatives. They also, many of them, went back to Labour. And in the same way that the UKIP vote disappeared, the Lib Dems smaller share of the vote than 2 years ago. Greens didn't do very well. So that progressive alliance that people talked about a little bit also was going in the direction of Labour. And then, as you rightly say, the result of that is that both the Conservatives and Labour polling millions of votes more than they've done at recent elections, a greater share of the vote than at recent elections.
And the share of the vote for Labour is astonishing when you look back at the recent records.
Yeah, absolutely. The share of the vote for Labour is probably the best they've had since the second Blair landslide in 2001. Ed Balls was very happy to point out to us when he was on the programme earlier today that nowhere near as many seats, of course, have been won by Labour, but the British electoral system operates in pretty capricious ways. But the Conservatives, too, with 13.6 million votes, this is the most votes they've got since 1992, and their share of the vote is comparable to those of the Mrs Thatcher's landslides in 83 and 87, when, of course, there was a big vote for the Lib Dems. So
let's just go back to that point about the UKIP vote, which many had expected would just shift to the Tories almost as a bloc. What went on there, then? Do you think it's the austerity? I mean, there's Brexit, but it's the austerity element here that
there was the odd result that will give people in Downing Street sort of a taste of what might have been. The Conservatives won Mansfield for the first time since 1923. They won Derbyshire North East for the first time since 1935. They won a seat in Stoke-on-Trent since the Stoke-on-Trent seats were set up in 1950. Those were exactly the kind of places they expected, not just those 3 places, but they expected them to be repeated times 10. But in other places, the Labour vote went up more than the Conservative vote, even though UKIP fell by a huge percentage.
Yeah, a lot of university towns. Let's just bring Chris Shipp in on that. And one of the things we haven't mentioned with Colin there, of course, is Scotland, of course. And Downing Street would have been very glad to have had Ruth Davidson backing her up in Scotland with what we saw emerge there overnight.
Yeah, a lot of praise for Ruth Davidson. Actually, what a lot of people have been making the difference between the way in which Theresa May ran this campaign and the way in which Ruth Davidson